Hi, great to have you with me. Do you go back this far?
Now, I have no objection to the twist as such, but it does represent some kind of change in our standards. What has happened to our concepts of beauty and decency and morality?
That was President Dwight Eisenhower with his reaction to the latest dance craze sweeping America. It was the twist. The year was 1961, and a little-known pop group called Joey D and the Starlighters was at the heart of this phenomenon because they had just recorded the Peppermint Twist. The godfather of the twist, Joey D, joins me today as my special guest.
Sandy.
Oh, Joey D, what a pleasure to meet you. Did you get all dressed up specially for me?
Well, I'll tell you what, in 1962, I was considered one of the top 10 best dressed men in America. So I just wanted to show off a little bit. I'm old school, Sandy. I like to dress.
I've been reading lots about you and I've had a bit of a look at your book also. I want to talk about that soon. But your rise to fame and fortune is an incredible story. I know you must have told it 1,000 or more times, but for people who don't know about you, can you tell us a little bit about Joey D and the Starlighters?
I can tell you a lot about Joey D and the Starlighters. First
Awesome.
of all, I'm a Jersey boy. I grew up with people like Frankie Valli and the Shirelles and Joe Pesci. I went to high school with the Shirelles.
The Shirelles were an all-girl group that really rocked the early 60s. They were formed in New Jersey in 1957 and known for their soft, sweet harmonies. Their music was a blend of pop rock and R&B, especially doo-wop and smooth uptown soul, that appealed to listeners right across the board, way before Motown had ever become a crossover pop phenomenon. The girls were 4 high school friends, Doris, Addie, Shirley and Beverly.
They got me my first record contract. And from there, we went to a place called the Peppermint Lounge in New York City, where I was doing a version of Hank Ballard's Twist. And we had some society people come in because the Peppermint Lounge is located on West 45th Street in Manhattan, New York City. And it's in the heart of the theater district. So one rainy evening, Merle Oberon, the wonderful actress, came in with Charlie Knickerbocker, a newspaper writer. And they came in to have a drink, and I was on stage. And at the time, very fortunate for me, I was doing my version of the twist, and the kids were dancing it. I had taught it to them. And Merle Oberon actually got up on stage and danced with some of the kids. Charlie Knickerbocker wrote about it in the daily newspaper in New York City about the Peppermint Lounge and Merle Oberon doing this dance. And the place just became famous literally overnight.
I'll just pause you there if you don't mind, because I want to get back to that. Let's just go back to high school. Were you already making music in high school? You said you went to high school with the Shirelles. They were obviously making music already too. Give us a bit of a picture, a bit of a description of what was going on in those days for you.
Okay, well, I started a group when I was about 10 years old. It was called the Thunder Trio. I played harmonica. I had Tony Sciutto playing drums and John Yannick playing guitar. And that's what we sounded like, Thunder. And we played a lot of polkas because the town I lived in, Passaic, New Jersey, along with the Shirelles, they had a Polish People's Home, and they would have the greatest polka bands in the world perform in this venue. So I was enamored with the polka music. So I started playing harmonica and I started playing polkas. But I love all kinds of music. But that was the genesis of Joey D and the Starlighters.
Right. You're not from a Polish background yourself.
No, my parents were both born in Italy. I'm first generation American.
Right. Your love of music was obvious from an early age. Were you always destined to be a musician and entertainer, do you think? Or did your parents have other things in mind for you?
I had gone to Teachers College in Wayne, New Jersey, Patterson Teachers College. And I wanted to be a history and English major. I wanted to become a professor eventually. That was my goal. So while I was going to school, I was making money on the side by playing saxophone and having a band. And I loved music so much that I took a hiatus of 6 months. And my mother was very disappointed because she wanted me to become a professor of English and history. And I said, Mom, I'm going to give it 6 months. If I don't make it in 6 months, I promise you I'll go back to school and get my degree and become a professor, hopefully.
Uh-huh.
So she reluctantly agreed. And during that 6 months, I went from local bars and bistros in New Jersey to become the number one band in New Jersey and got booked into the Peppermint Lounge. And we had that wonderful event with Merle Oberon coming in and Charlie Knickerbocker writing about it. Just a dream come true.
Incredibly serendipitous that they should be there that night, that performance should get all of that publicity, and you became an overnight sensation. What did an overnight sensation look like then?
Well, on any given night, Judy Garland would be there. She was there every night. I danced with her several times, and we became friends. Shirley MacLaine, John Wayne, Nat King Cole, the Beatles came in. I'll tell you a little aside about the Beatles in a moment. Rolling Stones came in, Marilyn Monroe, anyone who was famous during the early 1960s came to the Peppermint Lounge. It was just an incredible occurrence for a kid who came from a blue collar family in a small town in New Jersey.
Was it because the twist was so new? Had you brought the twist to this new audience?
Well, I had an integrated band, which was pretty much unheard of back in the early 60s because we had our situation with racism back then. And I didn't have any issues with that because my parents, and being a first generation American, the town I grew up in, Passaic, was very mixed, colored, and ethnicity kind of place. A wonderful place to grow up. And I'd say my high school was probably a third Black American. Back then we called them Negroes, but the names changed to Afro American now. I don't like the hyphenated American. Either you're American or you're not. It's not like I'm Italian American. My parents were from Italy, but I'm an American, and that's how I looked at it. My parents taught me there are good people and bad people. Don't judge them by any other way, by their color or their religion or anything else like that. So that was my mantra growing up, and I've taught that to my children and my grandchildren and even my great grandchildren now.
Great lesson. Everyone should learn that. But did you introduce the twist to all of these people?
Yeah, so by doing this and having a format of the dance became the number one dance, it became so popular. After Hank Ballard did it, Chubby Checker did it and made it a number one. I reincarnated it in a sense by making it famous, world famous in the Peppermint Lounge, because they re-released Chubby's record and it became number one again on Billboard. And that's the first and only time the same record has become number one on Billboard, except for maybe White Christmas by Bing Crosby.
Amazing.
So it was a great happenance and occurrence for me being at the right place at the right time. And luck had so much to do with it. It was so fortunate to be in the Peppermint Lounge that particular night and doing the song at that particular time when Merle Oberon came in. So it was just fantastic.
Dreams really can come true, can't they?
And I'll tell you the little story about the Beatles. In 1963, I did a 10-country tour of Europe. And one of the countries was Sweden. And one night in October in 1963, the Beatles were my opening act. So they were so great, and I thought they were so fabulous. And I had heard about them because I worked at a place called the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany. and so did they. But I never worked there the same time that they did. But I heard so much about them. And when we got to Stockholm, we became quite friendly. I went to their sound check and I said, wow, these guys are great. But at the time, they only had one hit record. It was called, I think it was Please Please Me. And I just was overwhelmed. That evening, I invited them to my suite in a hotel for rest in Stockholm, Sweden. And I said, I'd love to have you come in. We'll have some drinks and booze. I had a couple of girls in my group at the time. We had a marvelous evening together. And George told me as they were leaving, we're coming to the States in January of 64. And I said, well, why don't you stop by the Peppermint Lounge? He says, I promise you we'll be there. And being a little skeptic and coming from being a Jersey boy, that's how we are. We're a little skeptical, a little.
And what happened?
It was just a funny situation. But anyway, I'm starting to think of some of the events of that night. But anyway, George said, we're going to come and see you. And I'll be darned, in January of 1964, all four Beatles came into the Peppermint Lounge to see Joey D and the Starlighters. I was so impressed and so grateful that they showed up.
How incredible.
They were just making it. They were just had done the Ed Sullivan show, but their showing up meant a lot to me. It was just such a phenomenon, Sandy, that this would happen to a little kid from Jersey and playing the right music. But I was so determined. I had the Shirelles in my corner. They got me my first record deal. I didn't have the best singing voice, far from it. I wasn't the best sax player, far from it, but I was a good businessman. This was my way of making it in the music field. I had a band, but I couldn't sing. I was a good background singer, and I was blessed with a great ear. So I went out and I got Rogers Freeman, who was a black man, and he was in a doo-wop group called the Vibratones. And I got David Brigati, who's, you might know the name Brigati from the Rascals.
Sure
His
do.
younger brother's Eddie, and David sang on all the hit recordings. But anyway, David was with a group called the High Fives, and they were also a doo-wop group. Doo-wop groups, you can't go in a bar or a pub and sing doo-wop and make money. I had the band, so I was smart enough to go out and get the two best singers in New Jersey. And they were my lead singers, and I sang background. And I would sing a number here and there, a rock and roll number. David Brigati would sing Johnny Mathis, a Little Willie John, Drifters, Coasters, and Rogers would sing For Your Love by Ed Townsend. And whenever they sang, we rocked the house. And we started out backing up people like Frankie Avalon, Bobby Rydell, Connie Francis, because we were the number one band in New Jersey. And each year there'd be a contest on the number one band in Jersey. And each year we won it. We couldn't miss because I had the two best singers and I had the best musicians. I had the best band. And it was just an incredible occurrence. We had a band contest and Joe Pesci was in a band opposite us.
Uh-huh.
And he came in second 3 years in a row. And he got sick and tired of it. So he quit his band and joined my band. So I actually had Joe Pesci, who won an Academy Award, in my band.
How
and in
amazing.
1965, this is even crazier. I had Jimi Hendrix as my guitar player.
What?
So I have a guy who's got the English Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the U.S. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he played with my group for a year, and we had such great times together. He had a great sense of humor. Jimmy was the best guitar player in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
But the music you were doing was so unlike anything that Jimi Hendrix went on to do, wasn't it?
It's just incredible. What happened was I was in need of a guitar player, and I had a drummer by the name of Jimmy Mays, who was from Chicago, and I asked him, can you find me a guitarist? He said, yeah, but he might be a brother. And I said, I don't care What are you, his brother or sister or what? I want a great guitar player. He said, well, here's this dude just came off the road with the Isley brothers and Little Richard. And I said, well, he's got to be great then if he was with Little Richard and the Isley brothers. I said, bring him to my house. I'll have my nephew drive over and pick you up in the city with the other Jimmy, and we'll audition him at my house. So Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Mays and my nephew Johnny come to the house, comes in, starts playing. He says, what would you like me to play, Mr. D? I said, first of all, my name's Joey. Secondly, I'd like you to play what you like. And he started playing Curtis Mayfield. And I'm an R&B guy all my life. And I said, wow. I said, you don't have to play anymore. That's good enough for me. This is 1965. I knew all of his songs, Amen and all that stuff. He was just so special that here's what he does. 1965, I'm in my house with my two sons, who were 4 and 5 at the time. He lights up a joint, a celebratory joint in my house. Now my wife comes in from the hairdresser and she says, what the heck do you think? She used more flour than words. She's a Jersey girl too. And she was very, very upset. And she chased him out of my house. She said, get out of my house. She chased Jimi Hendrix out of my home. So as he's leaving, I ran to the door and I says, you got the gig. I'll see you Friday. And I closed the door and I had some row with my wife after that. She thought it was very disrespectful, and she was certainly right about that. And we had the two small children there, and that was not the right thing for him to do. But he was so happy that he got the gig, and I was so happy to have him as my guitarist. That here's what we did. He was so great, and I knew it immediately. I would have him go out on stage before we do a gig and just play guitar. He said, what do you want me to play? I said, just play for the people. Play a couple of minutes before we go out. And he played and wowed the audience, because that's how great he was, and that's how great I thought he was. So I'm happy that I was right about that.
Leading up to that, Joey D, you'd done a couple of appearances on movie soundtracks as well, hadn't you?
Yeah, we did 2 movies, one called Hey, Let's Twist and one called 2 Tickets to Paris, which were great. And I have a very storied career. I had the Ronettes come into the Peppermint Lounge one night, and they asked if they can sing with me while I'm on stage. But I saw them dancing out there. I said, even if they don't sing well, they look great and they can dance. So I had them come up on stage, and we did a version of Ray Charles' What I Say, and they tore the house down, and they could sing. And I hired them, and they were in my group. So here's another 3 people from the Hall of Fame that were members of Joey D and the Starliters. Then I put together a group which later became the Young Rascals. I had Felix Cavalieri, Eddie Brigati, the younger brother of David Brigati, and Gene Cornish, 3 of the 4 Rascals. The only one I didn't have was Dino Danelli. But I had another drummer, Ricky Shannon, that I thought was really good. So they started playing together in my nightclub. I had a nightclub in New York City called Joey D's Starlighter. They were just fabulous. They went out on their own, and that never bothered me. I always felt honored that these people that I had in my group, musicians and singers and dancers, they went on to bigger stardom than I did. They became members of Rock and Roll's Hall of Fame. And I was so pleased and proud of that I was able to
give them their start.
A little bit. I felt really good about it.
And of course, you've had so many hit singles as Joey D and the Starlighters too. We don't even have enough time to touch on all the top 40 successes that you've had. But if I could ask you, can you point to one that's closest to your heart?
Well, I did the motion picture 2 Tickets to Paris, and in that movie, we needed a love song. So Henry Glover who was my co-writer for Peppermint Twist, he and I wrote the Peppermint Twist. He got Johnny Nash to write me a love song. And Johnny Nash is a wonderful singer. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Of course I have.
I can see clearly now. He's
Absolutely.
dude, and just a wonderful singer. And he wrote a song called "What Kind of Love Is This" for me, and that's my favorite Joey Dina Starliters song. It's entirely different from all the other stuff I did, from "Shout" and Peppermint Twist, of course, and "Ya Ya," which was #1 in Europe because I guess the German people thought it meant yes, yes. Whatever. Became #1 on Radio Luxembourg. I've had so much success. I had more success than I deserve, believe me.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think you said something very apt just a little while ago when you said you were a really good businessman. So you were smart enough to realize what your strengths were and smart enough to realize what your shortcomings were. And you filled the space around you with people that would take up those positions. So you certainly deserved all the success that you had. How long did that run of success last?
Well, the first couple of years were success after success after success, and meeting all the wonderful people. I got to meet so many great people. It's just fantastic. The successes were great, but when we had the English invasion, we called it, in '64 with the Beatles and the Stones and Peter Noone, who's a good friend of mine, and we work a lot together here in the States now, from Herman's Hermits. They just took over the entire major venues, all the big places. And I was relegated to doing Holiday Inns and small hotels and some local bars. And I went from, the penthouse to the outhouse pretty much. But it's show business. That's what it was. The Beatles probably had 8 of the top 10 records in the country at the time, at one time. So I was pleased for them, but they did put me in the back seat of the car.
Yeah, they did that to a lot of acts, didn't they?
I went from a Rolls Royce to a jalopy, but it's okay. That's show business, and I'm okay with that.
Were you always okay with that? How did you handle it at the time?
Well, at the time, it was a financial burden for me because I wasn't making the money that I was used to making. I was making maybe a third or a fourth or maybe even a fifth of what I was making. Plus, I had an integrated band, and there were very few places, even north of the Mason-Dixon line, which is this where the South meets the North. A lot of people didn't like the idea that I had an integrated band, but I wasn't changing it because I went for quality, and that they were very qualified. I was a person who listened to his parents, #1, and I had all great people in the band. And like I said, it didn't matter on their color or ethnicity.
Yeah, of course.
I was very fortunate, Sandy.
You were very clever. What was the impetus for you to write the book?
Well, it took me 11 years to write this book. And the reason I wrote it was because I thought I had a great story. And I still think I have a great story. Well, just some of the few things I taught you about Pesci and the Rascals and Ronettes and Jimi Hendrix all being in my band. That enough is a story. In the midst of my book, I'm at the Tampa airport waiting for a flight to gig in Cleveland. So who's at the Tampa airport? Gary Puckett. So he says to me, "Joey, you done with your book?" Because everybody knows I've been writing a book forever. And I said, "Gary, I'm just not a book writer, man." He said, "You know what? I have a friend. He's a great writer." He says, "What about if I give you his number and you call him and see if you guys can click?" I called him on the phone. We have nothing in common. He said, "You know what? Let's try writing this book." And he said, "Let's do a trial." And he's taping every story that I'm giving him. And after a year and a half of giving him different stories, we did over 600 pages. He only picked out 280. He says, "I think we got a book." I read this book. I lived this book. And I just said, this is exactly how I would have written it had I been a writer. So I was very pleased.
The book, as Joey mentioned, is called Peppermint Chronicles, My True Story of Sex, Rock and Roll, Jimi Hendrix, Fighting Racism and the Mob. It's the tale of his success and includes stories about many of the artists he's worked with and befriended. The Beatles, Judy Garland, John Wayne, Jackie Kennedy, Nat King Cole, Shirley MacLaine and Dick Clark, just to name a few. The book's cover shows Joey jumping for joy high into the air. I asked him about it.
Well, actually, if you look behind me, there's a Leslie speaker from the organ. I was jumping off that speaker. I always jumped off the Leslie during Shout. My closing number ever since I went to the Peppermint Lounge and I heard the Isley Brothers. And in my opinion, they did the best version of Shout ever. I was at this club for a week, so I should have known the parameters. I missed seeing one beam. So I jumped up and I hit my head so hard, I fell flat on my back and was unconscious for maybe a minute or two. They had the ambulance come in. I must have hit the yes button because they said, "You okay?" "Yes." "You want to sing anymore?" "Yes." "You want to go to the hospital?" "Don't want to go to the hospital?" "Yes." No matter what they asked, it was yes.
Joey was right back into performing after the accident and says despite his more than 60 years of onstage work, he still gets a little nervous.
I have maybe 5 seconds of trepidation, but soon as I go out and the light hits me and I see my audience, they're going to get the best that Joey D has to offer. When I'm on stage, you can tell I'm having a hell of a time. And I promise myself that. And I also promise myself when it becomes a chore to me and I'm not enjoying what I'm doing and I'm not giving my A game, I'm done. I wanted to be rock and roll. And that's what I've been all my life. Why change now? I was hooked up with the mob. The mob owned the nightclub, and they also owned my record label, Roulette Records. Vito Genovese, one of the 5 families that ruled New York City, he was the boss. And I never got paid any royalties from my record company, record royalties, recording royalties. I shouldn't say never got. I got $13,000 for all the millions of records that I sold. And the reason I think I got it is because my name ended in a vowel. And
You were Italian, yeah.
Italian descent, so they figured I'll give them a few bucks. Morris Levy, who was the owner of the record company, worked for the mob. He told me this, and he was true to his word. He says, "Kid, I get the record money, you get the performance money." And that's how it ended up. And it was all right because I was making a lot of money performing.
Yeah. Even today, the Peppermint Twist can be heard on radio stations all over the world. Are you picking up money each time it's heard today?
I'm still fortunate that every 3 months I get a royalty check. Not as big as it used to be, but it's still a nice royalty check for money that I'm making while I'm sleeping, while the records being played all over the world.
What could be better? Joey D, is there a formula for doing the twist correctly? How are you teaching your audiences to do the twist? What's involved?
Well, my version was with Henry Glover. I told him I wanted to do it different than the straightforward that Hank Ballard did. "Come on, baby, let's do the twist." Mine, I said I wanted to be more funky. And funky to me means a little more soulful, a little more groovy. So he came up with I said, yes, that's what I want. Something just like that. So we go into the studio. Now I have Roger Freeman singing the Peppermint Twist, and Henry said, nah. And Dave Brigati sings it. Nah, that's not what I want. He said, "Why don't you sing it, Joey?" I said, "I'm a background singer." He said, "Try it, because sometimes the writer of a song can capture the essence of it a lot better." And I said, "I'll try it." So I went in there. "Well, they got a new dance," and they go, "That's exactly what I want." He tells me over the microphone in the studio. I said, "Okay, I'll try it. We'll do it." And I got it in, I think 2 takes. It might have been one and a half. And that became the version, and I became the lead singer then.
And in terms of the audience dancing to it?
And here's how I got them to dance. Because in the lyric that Henry and I wrote, we did 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, jump, 1, 2, 3, kick, 1, 2, 3, jump. And that's how I would teach it to the audience.
Right.
So they would do my version of the twist whenever I played. And a couple of times I did some shows with Hank Ballard and a couple with Chubby, and they would do their version. I would do mine. And I always thought mine was more soulful, and it was different than the original.
Yeah.
But
We loved it. Everyone still loves it. It's one of those songs, isn't it? And your autobiography is just sensational. It's become one of the top-selling music history books on Amazon. So a massive congratulations to you for that too.
I want to just tell you a few of the people that have endorsed this book, and I'm so honored. Sir Barry Gibb from
The Bee Gees. Yep.
Bee Gees, okay? I mean, he wrote some beautiful things. Frankie Valli, Aaron Neville from the Neville Brothers,
Wow.
Ronnie Spector, who we just lost recently, and I did the eulogy at her funeral. Frankie Avalon, the Shirelles that I went to school with, Julian Lennon. It's amazing. All these people wrote some beautiful things on the back cover about the book and about me, and I'm so honored and flattered. It's an incredible story. Not because it's my story, but it's an incredible story about the early 1960s and the history of what was going on with the Vietnam War, racism, and how we got around it and how we did it, and how I did some gigs down south and the way we were treated when we got down there. It's all in that book. Besides,
Awesome.
and all the
Right.
stories that I can tell you about Jimi Hendrix, who was a chick magnet, as you probably heard, and we had a lot of fun on stage, off stage, and it was such an honor working with people like Jimmy and the Rascals and Pesci. But you have to remember this. I'm in New York City where there's low hanging fruit. The best musicians in the world, that's where you make it. I just want to say one thing just before we close, and that is in 1962, I had my number one record fan club was in Australia and New Zealand.
Very good. I better let you go.
All right, Sandy, very nice speaking with you, and God bless you. Take care.
Lots of love, Joey D. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Joey D, who's been honoured with multiple awards for his music and in 2010 even had a street corner dedicated to him in his hometown of Passaic, New Jersey. Thanks for being here with me today. I'm sure you found the story of Joey D and the Starliters illuminating, even if you weren't around when they first set out. Can I count on your company again same time next week? I hope so. I'll look forward to being back with you then. Meantime, have fun, won't you? Whatever you're up to. Bye now.